Okay, so Chris has brought a team with him. I'm not going to introduce everybody but that's great. It's great that you have brought everybody, and I'll remind everyone that we are recording this, so I'm the only one that's allowed to swear. And so if you, and I'll also edit them, and each presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel and shared with our member municipalities and those in Northwestern Ontario. And so people will have an opportunity that weren't able to get a break today to watch. They'll be able to see this presentation on YouTube in the very near future. So again, I'd like to thank yourselves for presenting again and taking the time to walk us through the tourism field post-pandemic in Northern Ontario. I'll switch it over to you, Chris. I don't know if you're leading or not, but I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Mac. I don't know. I don't know whether I should be changing my passwords right now or doing something, because that was terrifying, that presentation, and definitely something to think about. I'm just gonna pick you up on one thing. We're not out of it yet. And that's probably going to what we talk about at the start of the session, but then we're going to talk about some opportunities that the tourism industry has moving forward, both as an industry as a whole, but also working with municipalities and the opportunities that are there for growth and greater connectivity and working together. And thank you again for the opportunity to spend some time with you and those watching this morning. We really enjoyed our last conversation back in November. And so we've got the band back together for that difficult second album. And so hopefully it will be okay and it won't disappoint too many people. But we've got the same faces who I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a minute, because I hate writing biographies for people, because I always leave out the important bits that people are proudest of or like doing the most. But I'm just going to reflect just a little bit quickly on the 9 months that have sort of passed since we last came together to speak on this learning morning. And then we're going to crack into some questions and some discussion topics. And I was thinking last time that we came together was in November and in 2021, and we just all as a group come back from TIAO's Ontario Tourism Summit, which was one of the first indoor events that had happened since the lockdown. It was restricted capacity, but it was one of the first events that we'd held, and it was in Ottawa. And we were the mood and the feeling of progress and the feeling of exaltation was just so high. We were all on a wave because we were back together, meeting, networking, talking about the future. We'd had an okay-ish summer. But I was thinking, we came back and then 6 weeks later, Omicron happened. And then we had the chaos at the border, the images of what's happening in our airports across Canada, the fact that our businesses had to take on so much more debt to get through another 8 months of closures and restrictions and capacity restrictions. So, it's incredible how quick things can change for the better or for the worse sometimes. So we're going to kick things off. First off, by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and just explain what they do. And then we're going to go straight into asking them what the current state of the tourism industry is in Northern and Rural Ontario at the moment. And then we'll broach out. So I'm going to start by asking Laurie to introduce herself and just explain her role within the industry.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us. My name is Laurie Marcil. I'm the Executive Director of Nature and Outdoor Tourism Ontario. I've been with NOTO for 30 years. Yeah, 30 years. I have a great passion for tourism and I'm very honored to work for as many tourism operators as I do. They're wonderful people.
Thank you, Laurie. Kevin.
Ani Bojo Minok Jep, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Gigadon Nene Dejnakas, Nadona Sing Donjaba, come to you from Manitoulin Island. Unlike Laurie, I haven't been around for 30 years. I didn't start as a summer student when I was 13 at NOTO, but I've been around 2 years doing this work. But I help, my formal title is the President and CEO of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, and we're the first and only recognized voice for the largest Indigenous tourism industry in Canada, which is obviously located right here in Ontario. And it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm an open book, so anybody can ask me anything about anything, and we'll try to help you out, because that's what we do here. We try to help people. We got you.
Thank you, Kevin. Rick.
Good morning, everyone. And Lori started when she was 8. That's the official number. That's what I heard. Rick Lazell, I'm the CEO at the Boating Ontario Association. So we represent 500 plus member companies across Ontario who serve the recreational boating community. I've been in the boat business for 33 years, 5 years at Boating Ontario. Holy cow, I'm not sure how that anniversary happened a couple weeks ago. But certainly happy to help. Lots and lots of opportunity with what the pandemic has brought within recreational boating for municipalities and communities to tap into some growth options in the future. So look forward to the conversation, and thanks.
Thanks, Rick. And finally, David.
There we go. Dave McLaughlin with Destination Northern Ontario. I've been with the organization now for 10 years in this capacity, and we are funded through the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. And our main task is to grow the tourism industry in Northern Ontario. I also come from a tourism background. My family's been in the flying and training and flying, fishing and hunting business for over 60 years. So, hopefully, we get to the end of mitigating the impacts of the pandemic and can get on with growing the business.
Thank you, David. And my name's Chris Bloor, and I'm the president and CEO of TIAO, and I've been in the tourism industry for about 5 minutes. I've actually been in TIAO for about 2 years, but compared to the colleagues on the phone, I am a relative newcomer. Right. So 9 months ago, we were talking about the dramatic impacts and the catastrophic impacts that the pandemic had on the industry. Obviously, borders being closed, restrictions on capacity, Ontario residents not free to travel in the way that they had been previously when we were smashing records on visitor numbers and economic prosperity and activity. Where are we now? There are mixed messages out there. We see people desperate to get on a plane and having to wait hours to get on one. We see stories of really high price increases across the tourism industry for hotel rooms, etc. What is the truth about how the tourism industry is responding right now? And particularly, how is it responding? What is the state of the industry in Northern Ontario? And to start that conversation, I'm going to ask David to sort of give us a highlight of where you think we are now within the industry and what you're seeing on the ground.
So I guess like the virus itself, it's affected various sectors within the tourism industry differently. But I think right now, where we're at, we have some sectors that are doing well and other sectors that aren't doing so well. And we did quite well during the last 2 summers, but we're starting to see a little bit of a wane, I think, of that domestic visitor. That were kind of held captive the last 2 summers. Now there's more choices open to them. So we're starting to hear people aren't as busy this summer as they were in the summer before. One of the bright areas is definitely the Great Lakes cruising with the cruise ships back, and actually the number of berths on the Great Lakes have doubled since pre-pandemic. And then probably on the worst side is and Laurie will probably be able to speak more to it, but the resource-based tourism sector. And as bad as the numbers for the borders were for national and provincial, we're seeing that they're worse at the northern border crossings, where we're only seeing 25% to maybe a third of pre-pandemic numbers for Americans crossing into Northern Ontario. So that's obviously having a huge impact on our resource-based tourism industry. We're probably out about $1.2 billion now in sales. So, and that will affect not only the operators, but that's affecting businesses and even on tax revenues. And then again, we're seeing, like in terms of our performance, where we did better on the road-based tourism the last couple of years, we're starting to see those hotel occupancies now approaching more of traditional patterns. So we've got a pretty steep hill to climb yet.
Thanks, David. Before I go to Laurie, I'm just going to go to Kevin at this point, because Kevin, last time we met 9 months ago, you were talking about the impacts, the severe impacts that the pandemic had had on Indigenous tourism, specifically in Northern Ontario. I just wanted to check in with you right now and just see, you've been very successful in getting some much needed relief from both the provincial and the federal government to Indigenous businesses, specifically in Northern Ontario. I just wondered if you could give us an update on how you feel that the sector is faring right now and what's your prognosis for the future.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. And yeah, it's we did get a lot of support from the provincial and federal governments to help the businesses. With that being said, the biggest support that we did receive is simply support from the consumers that are demanding Indigenous tourism experiences. So with, in particular to Northern Ontario, there's over 80 First Nations in Northern Ontario. The bulk of our membership is in Northern Ontario. So with over close to 60% of our members, they're reporting that, they've been busier than they've ever been. To be quite frank, we're not surprised because leading up to the pandemic, there was unprecedented demand for Indigenous tourism experiences. With that being said, their businesses are still, they're hanging on. That extra support is very much needed and appreciated. And we're still on track to a projection that we set out this past November, where we projected a full recovery back to 2019 numbers for our sector by next summer, 2023. And I'd say and this is anecdotal at this point, we're still going through the process of marking this year, but I think it's safe to say the Indigenous tourism industry is thriving on some fronts in terms of demand and contributions to the GDP, but there are still other challenges like labor shortages that we're facing just like the rest of the industry, and we need to lean on each other, but things are looking positive, but there's still things that could go wrong, unfortunately, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on many fronts to make sure that next year is just as successful as this year, and we're not dealing with the ripple effects of COVID or Omicron or whatever other variant is coming our way or has come our way. But yeah, things are looking on the up and up, Chris. So that's very positive, but we still have work to do.
Thanks, Kevin. And that's really positive to hear that those numbers for those projections. And I think you and your team deserve a lot of credit for helping people along the way on that and giving consumers the opportunities to support Indigenous tourism businesses. I'm going to switch back to Laurie at this point because Laurie, resource-based tourism is a huge economic contribution to our regional economy. It's over $500 million. It supports over 1,300 businesses. And David touched on some of the problems that we're specifically facing in the North right now. And you've been working incredibly hard as an advocate for these businesses and for Northern Ontario businesses. Could you give us an update on where we are right now? Why is Northern Ontario struggling compared to other parts of the province in terms of visitor numbers? Are the mandates having a big impact still? So what's the current state of affairs and what has that done to the state of businesses moving forward, particularly in debt and their ability to hire, etc.?
Right. Thanks, Chris. There's a lot there to unpack. So there are over 1,300 tourism businesses, resource-based tourism businesses. And these are the lodges, the campgrounds, the remote operators, the fly-ins, the trine-ins, the drive-ins, the boat-ins. These are the ones that their business is based on outdoor experiences. So traditionally, that's been a very, the clientele base has been predominantly US. So if you move from Northeastern Ontario to Northwestern Ontario, you'll see 60% creeping up to 100% US clientele base when you hit Northwestern Ontario. So of course, with the pandemic being the way it was and the borders being shut, that was very challenging for a lot of folks. And, we did see the border reopen for fully vaccinated folks last August. However, there's still a number of barriers there for those people to come into Canada, and they remain today. So there's the ArriveCan app. There's been several challenges with the ArriveCan app. There's been the random testing has been another challenge, particularly in Northern Ontario, because the process of doing a random test, requiring that you are provided with a kit and then you have to have cell service to call up a health professional and do your test on video with them and then find a way to get the test submitted. So those have been some pretty big challenges. And, you know, social media is a thing. And as people are having those experiences, they're sharing those experiences. And so people are, even though they can come into the country, are very concerned about meeting some of these challenges. Just like folks right now, all of us Canadians thinking about, do we want to go air travel or not? So there's, you know, that's a huge barrier for a lot of our traditional guests. And you know, we had operators, we suggested that in December, they start looking at their deposits that they have kept, the bookings that they have kept and pushed forward into this year. And, you know, suggested that they need to kind of talk to their clients, find out if they're unvaccinated, because we don't know when the unvaccinated folks are going to be able to come in. So they took a look at their bookings and they, you know, said, okay, I think we're good. The bookings that we have reserved for this year are vaccinated folks who can enter the country. And but then in May, we heard of a ton of cancellations. So we did a survey in May and it came up with, you know, like the cancellations were just immense. So that meant at that point, they were estimating that they were losing $100 million for this season. So this is May. Marketing season's over for them. So, and you know, our operators have definitely tried to, you know, look at the domestic market and try to get folks. The staycation tax credit did help with that. But they're, you know, traditionally, we haven't done a fantastic job of really promoting our outdoor experiences to the domestic market because we haven't had to. Our lodges have been full with American guests. So, you know, there were definitely some success stories in marketing to the domestic market, you know, but there are still many challenges, particularly in Northwestern Ontario. And if you are a remote operator, a fly-in operator anywhere in the province, it doesn't matter where you are, remote operating, remote vacations, fly-in vacations are just, they don't seem to, you know, it's going to take some selling to get that domestic market interested in those kinds of trips. So, and you mentioned the debt load. So in that survey, we also found out that folks were on average $187,000 in new debt because of COVID. And the vast majority of those dollars are owed to government, the Canadian government, because of the Canadian government loan programs. Those debts are due next December. So we've got, you know, at this point, 18 months or less to pay back those loans. And folks are struggling this year to fill their lodges. You know, it's just, it's very concerning, very concerning. I mean, even if they are able to get guests to come and they're able to have, you know, even if they could get 50% capacity or 60% capacity, the increase in costs of operating are really challenging them on actually having a profit this year. You know, I think it's going to be, and then we've got workforce challenges. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. I know I'm painting a horrible picture, but these folks are resilient. They are committed. They are trying really hard. We do, you know, we are continuing to go to government and explain the situation to them and really request that they support the industry in other ways. You know, I think I've heard from quite a few operators that they don't want any more loan programs. They just want to be able to open their doors, welcome their guests back, generate their own revenue, and move on with things. So, you know, I'm kind of concerned. I am concerned that we're, you know, through our survey, we also kind of sussed out that about 10 to 15% of those businesses are concerned about their longevity. They are concerned about whether their businesses will be viable after another kind of broken season. And then in the Northwest, we also have the challenges of flooding, like of all years. You know, it's just very, very negative, but it is what it is. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing. And, you know, we're not alone in the workforce troubles. We've been really trying to help them through a program that I'm working with David on, that David is actually gone out and sought the funding for through Destination Northern Ontario. We're working with Ontario Tourism Education Council, and we're really filling positions through that program, the Tourism Skills Net North program. We're training people, we are getting them placed with operators. The training part is so critical though. We are building a new workforce. So there are some really, neat things that are coming out of this year. I think our businesses are really well prepared for, the next crazy thing that's going to happen. We help build the protocols, health and safety protocols that make businesses feel a lot stronger. Their guests feel a lot more supported when it comes to health and safety. So there's some really positive things that have come out of this, but we've got to get our operators through this. It's going to be a long haul.
Thank you, Laurie. It was a big question. It was a big answer, so I appreciate that. Thank you for covering everything. I'm going to move on now because in the short term, there's obviously a lot that we can do working with the tourism industry and municipalities working together to try and get the industry through this difficult, certainly mixed period. And in the short term, I'm really interested in hearing from you what you think we can do with municipalities to try and get us through this recovery period. We've mentioned the staycation tax credit. We've mentioned initiatives that are happening on the ground in our communities. I'm going to go to Rick because Rick, 9 months ago, you were telling us about how you were, I don't want to say captaining the ship because that feels too cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. How boating was having a resurgence. It was doing fantastic because it was a great outlet for people in a time when we had to socially distance. So in the short term, how can we leverage boating and transient boating, working with municipalities to get some money into our towns and our rural economies? How do we do that in the short term?
Thanks, Chris. And I think the answer starts with a question to the municipalities, and that is, when was the last time you looked at your town from the water? Typically, we look at our towns from the road access, as that's our pathway to bring visitors into our towns. And anybody that is waterfront, and I look at Wawa and Kenora and Strong and go, you have waterfront opportunities. I've personally just come back from an 11-day boating experience with 37 boats. Excuse me, we went from Orillia to Killarney and back. We experienced some very interesting Georgian Bay waters on the journey this year. But I can tell you that of the 11 nights, I spent 7 nights inland in marinas. My boat is about $80 to $90 a night. That's my hotel cost. And once we're off the water, we are eager to get on land and go into your town and visit your stores and participate in your restaurants and perhaps a beverage. But we are an active and legitimate opportunity for towns that haven't looked at your town from the waterfront to say, can we support our local marina? Or if we've got a municipal marina, is there options for us to look at the transient boating community as an opportunity? And there's transient boaters. Certainly in Ontario, we know that growth during the pandemic has been double digit, both in 2020 and 2021. Our organization is working with the industry on a number of consumer-focused retention communication skills and focuses as we try to retain as many of these new boaters as have come into the sport and keep them boating. So there's organizations like the Loopers out of the US. Certainly those folks spend a ton of money. Is there opportunity with them? So I think the dollars that are left on the table with waterfront communities can be left by simply not taking that moment to look at town from the water. And my last comment will be, we all understand what's happened with cottage pricing in the province of Ontario. It has certainly passed the capabilities financially of many Ontario families. My household is one of them, but I own a 32-foot cruiser that my wife and I can spend lots of time on. And that is our cottage. That is how we tour in the province of Ontario. So a different mindset, perhaps. We're not suggesting you need to go and spend multiple millions of dollars to build a marina. You've probably got a marina in your town. There's probably something there. Can you work with your local existing facility to talk about what do we do together to embrace transient boaters? Because we don't ask for much. Right? We want a place to dock the boat, ideally with some power, and then we're good. We got it from there. You really don't have to do a lot more for us. We'll find the pub, and we'll find the restaurant, and we'll find your gift shops, and I can guarantee you my Visa card will tell you we spend lots of money. So I'll leave it at that. Chris, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted me to touch on that, but I really do think there's opportunity here, and certainly Southern Ontario is capitalizing and experiencing it. So.
No, thanks, Rick. And you've said to me before that buying a boat is the new buying a cottage, and so that is definitely something that's happening a lot more as people make different decisions, specifically with house prices just continuing to increase. But on the theme of opportunities, Kevin, you touched in your answer before about the current state of the industry, about the progress that's being made, the size of the number of your members that are actually in Northern Ontario. And a lot of people who will be on this call or be watching the recording will be saying, we love the product that's on offer, but we also love the role in which Indigenous tourism can play as part of reconciliation, not just economic, but social and cultural. Like, how does the municipality work with you to enhance any offering that they have, or to support Indigenous businesses? How do we start that dialogue going so that we can build the opportunities that we have within the community?
Yeah, so to follow Rick's lead, to keep it really simple, I'll ask a question of the municipalities as well as, when's the last time you went and had a cup of coffee or a glass of tea or whatever with a First Nations person or a First Nations community or their leadership or whomever? And simply put, how I like to describe this is we're not going anywhere collectively here across the North, across Ontario, across Canada. And when it comes to reconciliation, we simply enough need to be good neighbors. And, when we get to know each other a bit more, we don't go to each other with, projects in hand, and we're going to each other genuinely to get to know each other and be good stewards of the land that we're looking out for. We're going to see progress. I'll share a document in the chat. That's another starting point. But also, when we think of this, when we start to look at things from a mutually beneficial perspective to make sure that everyone is, benefiting in a way that they're comfortable with, we're going to see progress, and we're going to see ourselves in the most prosperous region in the world, culturally, socially, economically, and or whatever metric we want to put out there. But I think it starts with a conversation. It doesn't necessarily start with a project. Not that that's wrong, but getting to know each other and building the relationships between Indigenous communities and municipalities and the leadership groups, but also at the very grassroots level, at the ground level, those conversations need to be had, because there are still some unresolved issues that need to be rectified, and to reconciliation needs to happen on both sides of that equation. And I like to tell people, non-Indigenous people or non-Native people are going to make mistakes on this learning curve, and that's okay. And on the flip side, Indigenous people, specifically First Nations people, need to be understanding and patient with that as well, while we educate and share, some of the true history of the lands and of the country and where we've come from over the last 500 years and what we've experienced. So, that's a good start, Chris. So just simply enough, let's have some conversations, say hi to each other on the street. Let's be kind to each other and be good people to each other.
Thank you, Kevin. And you made a really good point in that conversation, and something about that you've been doing throughout your life, but as we've known each other professionally, you've been at the forefront of some really good DEI webinars and programs over the last 6 months. I think the one that you did for us was called DEI 101, learning the basics, creating that safe space for people to learn more, to become comfortable talking about DEI issues. I don't want to offer out your telephone number again, like you tend to do on these chats, but, in the document you shared, I'm sure your contact details are in there, and municipalities do use Kevin as a resource. If you just simply want to start at the beginning and learn more, and start to learn to have those conversations and to reach out, well before any projects are proposed or economic discussions, I would certainly do that, because I know from our membership in TIAO how grateful they are to Kevin and the ITO team for some of the webinars and some of the DEI sessions that he's put on, just to bring people together, to feel comfortable together and to discuss important discussions and have those coffees. And that's almost the preliminary step before the first step you were talking about, Kevin. So I really encourage people to get in contact with Kevin about that. I'm conscious of time because we're fast approaching half an hour, but we've talked about some of the short-term supports. David mentioned the staycation credit that's out there right now, and really hoping that municipalities are trying to promote the use of that to attract people to their destinations and attractions. But long-term, we know that there is so much, we know as an industry that we have many, many opportunities that are out there that we've not come close to realizing just yet. And I want to start with David and Laurie about how can municipalities and the tourism industry work together to put together long-term economic plans to build the industry, to increase that collaboration. Like, David, you've talked about simple things like visitor information program, trail signage, wayfinding. What are the things that we can do working together to increase the size of our output and work together better?
Yeah, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity. And I think, before the pandemic, the North, we kind of stagnated around the $1.6 billion in tourism receipts. And, there's a huge opportunity to really grow that. So working with municipalities, of course, finding improved visitor services for when people are in the region, that's paramount. But also working together, and I know Megan and Alison, we've been working on some new touring routes, and we have a site plan into the ministry right now. Once that's approved, the Todd signs for the Heart of Canada touring route will be going into the ground later this month. So there's a tremendous opportunity to work with municipalities in terms of marketing, MAT tax, supporting product development. We have a shortage of quality fixed roof accommodations that meet visitor expectations. So again, with the support of FedNor and the NOHFC, doing a project there that we should have the preliminary findings in the next few months to really hopefully lead a revolution in terms of accommodations. And I'm sure we've all had the experience. I just had it, last week traveling to Thunder Bay, trying to find a room. I paid $500 for a room in Thunder Bay, and I paid $200 for a room in Scriber. Don't begrudge paying the money, but we just don't have the accommodations available or that meet today's traveler expectation overall.
Thank you, David. Same question to you, Laurie.
One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is because we've been working with the TSNN program, is part of this year's project is going to be creating an awareness campaign for tourism as a career. So I think, there is a role to play for our municipalities in this campaign, or at least getting the word out about this campaign. So I think, job creation is huge. We have a lot of folks that are not working in Northern Ontario, and they're, maybe haven't thought of tourism. Maybe they're not quite sure what tourism's all about, and where the opportunities lie, and where the skill development, how many transferable skills you can attain through working in the tourism lodge, resort, restaurant, hotel, attraction. I mean, there's so much there. So I think, definitely a role to play for municipalities in helping us develop a tourism workforce and getting the word out about, what it means to work in tourism. I think that's something, building on what David said, just building, a tourism ambassador program, and working with small businesses and doing a little bit of training, or, whether it's just making sure that your staff in every small business know how far it is to travel from, here to here, and where they can go and see a beach, where they can go to explore a trail, all of those kinds of things, just making your community more tourism aware itself. I think that would be a huge, huge help.
Thank you, Laurie. Rick, you've often talked about how we get more electric vehicles in the north, or how we make our industry more green and sustainable. Is there anything particular that you would like to see greater collaboration on moving forward with municipalities?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a stat that I'll share with you. I had a conversation with Alex Anderson from Camping in Ontario yesterday. Her organization represents 60,000 campsites across the province. Ours represents 40,000 boat slips across the province. Electric vehicle technology is coming at an incredibly accelerated pace to both segments of tourism, and the government is not even considering rural grid needs right now to bring electrification into campgrounds, to bring electrification into marinas. As an example, we have a member in Point of Barrel who has 4 Tesla superchargers in his marina right now, needs 8 more for immediate today's demand on his customer base. Hydro One has quoted him $100,000 just to bring the grid. So my point in this comment is I would encourage you to be openly speaking to government about the need for rural Ontario, all of rural Ontario, to be recognized and to be at the table in these early discussions about electric vehicle charging. It's not just the cars, folks. There's so much more, certainly in tourism, that's going to be affected very, very quickly. I'll close with, I know there is one very well-known boat line that will be 100% electric next year. So it's moving at, I'm blown away by how fast this is moving, but it's moving in a hurry. It takes 20 minutes on average to fill a boat at a fuel dock. When that same boat comes in and says, I've had the kids out tubing for 2.5 hours and now I need to charge the boat and I need 3 hours, the business model's not there, and nor is the infrastructure. So again, my point is just get that on the radar as you're having your conversations, that your facilities in rural Ontario absolutely need that support to bring the grid in before the campgrounds and the marinas are all full of electric powered vehicles that we can't charge.
Thanks, Rick. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate all of your answers. From and how we can build bridges and have mutually beneficial conversations moving forward. And Mac, I'm conscious that we've come to the end of our time, but we've touched on some of the issues that we have moving forward, which is definitely going to be labor as a #1 issue for us in the industry right now, alongside getting those borders fully open so that we can welcome the clientele, particularly from the United States, over that land border, and get that rubber tourism tire business going again to the extent that it was before the pandemic. Affordable housing is a massive conversation for us. It's great that we can attract people to work with our industry, but if they can't afford to live anywhere near their job, they're going to choose to work in different environments and different industries. And so we have some real immediate challenges that we've spoken about, but also when we come out of this pandemic fully, there are those big systematic challenges that are still in front of us that we need to make decisions on now so that we can reap the rewards and the benefits in 5 or 10 years. Because the tourism industry sometimes I think is thought of as the fun industry. It's not thought of as the dollar in tourism doesn't equate to the same dollar in other industries. Well, that's just bad economic thinking and planning. And the tourism industry and the visitor economy in general has a real opportunity now to be part of that economic discussion moving forward. And TIAO, and I'll share these details with you, Mac, for the municipalities on the line, are having a series of roundtables with ministers over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We're meeting with Minister McNaughton in a couple of weeks to talk about labour. We'll be talking to Minister Lumsden to talk about the tourism industry moving forward, how we can make those investments now into the infrastructure of the tourism industry so that we can really, really, really grow the industry to the extent that we haven't really done compared to other destinations and attractions in other countries and our competitors. So there's a lot going on in the tourism industry right now. I think it's fair to say that we're a lot more optimistic than we were during some of the parts of the last 2.5 years, but still frustrated that our industry is treated slightly different than others. And I really hope moving forward that we get those borders open as quickly as possible and, try and get as good a summer and fall as possible and really plan for a fulsome 2023. And, happy to take any questions now, Mac. I'll make sure that we pass on everyone's details to you, and I'll pass on the briefing documents that we're taking to AMO conference later this month so that municipalities can see the real wide government whole approach that we're taking, whether it's on education, whether it's on infrastructure, the whole government approach that we're taking to try and grow the tourism industry in this province. So I'll hand it back over to you, Mac, and thank the panelists for joining me this morning.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thanks everybody for chatting. I'm just really surprised that Kevin didn't once mention the swing bridge going in that's causing all kinds of problems for people trying to leave the island. Because I understand that that's quite the challenge, and they're setting up rest areas inside the arenas and things like that. So it's it's probably been in the last 6 months, the FONOM board has made its way to Manitoulin Island, has made its way to Parry Sound, has made its way to Elk Lake. Disappointed in Elk Lake that they can't find a vendor for their Lake Nipissing perch and pickerel, because that was my favorite treat when I got to go to Elk Lake was the perch, but they can't find a vendor. So David and Lori, if you can work on that for them, that'd be great. Rick, I took your point in regards to electrification. Hadn't thought of it from the aspect of marine, but I take your point, and FONOM will be mentioning that and whispering that in certain years, because it's and to your point, it's coming to snowmobiles. It's coming. This is the way the world's moving, and Northern Ontario can't be left behind in regards to this. So thank you for enlightening me and making me aware of that. So we'll definitely work with you to work on that. So there weren't any questions in chat. So again, very good presentation. Want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to come and prepare. It's nice that Rick was able to come out of holidays for us just for this. So, and again, Chris, thanks very much, and thank you all for taking the time today. We'll communicate and do this again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Miigwech, Palma Peep.